Hi guys, my name is Tiffany and welcome back to another video. So in this video, I want to share with you guys on some tips and tricks for those who are doing their preceptorship in the NICU.
'Cause anywhere with you feels right. Anywhere with you feels like Paris in the rain. Paris in the rain. When I'm with you, when I'm with you, Paris in the rain. Paris in the rain.
So I have done my preceptorship in the NICU and I got really lucky because only a few were selected to do their senior preceptorship in the NICU. And for those that do not know, a senior preceptorship, or some schools even call it a practicum, where basically it's your last semester of nursing school where you're able to select a unit that you want to specialize in and you'll get to do your preceptorship in there and you'll follow around another nurse for the duration of your last semester before you graduate. So I got really lucky because I got to do mine in the NICU and it was something that I just knew for the rest of my career is that I wanted to work in the NICU. So I just want to share with you guys some of my tips back then when I was a student still doing my senior preceptorship, and things that I really appreciate for those that I am currently teaching when I do have some students that will come in, they'll do their rotations or doing their senior preceptorship. What are some things that I personally enjoy that I see from them that makes me appreciate them as a nurse and having them as my preceptor-y? Hopefully these tips are helpful for you guys, for those who are starting their preceptorship soon or planning to do their preceptorship soon. This can apply for all preceptorships, doesn't have to be in the NICU, but also I do want to share some specific NICU tips as well. So stay tuned for this video. I want to share with you guys the number one most important thing for sure is always introducing yourself. Like, this may seem like a very common thing, but you'll actually be very surprised at how often it doesn't happen, where I'll get a student or someone that is following me and I don't even know their name because they didn't even introduce themselves. So all I see is their name next to my name on the assignment sheet, and then I kind of just assume that is their name or whatever. But a lot of times it's just, you know, common courtesy, politeness to introduce yourself to your nurse, and that way they will recognize you. And sometimes nurses aren't doing this on purpose, but they just don't know that they have a student or that there's someone following them. And so definitely ask like the charge nurse or someone on the unit, who is this nurse, and that way you can go up to them and introduce yourself. And the most important thing after that, after introducing yourself, is letting them know your limitations. So it is super important for the nurse that you're following to know what you can and can't do. So before I even get started on anything, I will always ask the person that I'm preceptoring, what are your limitations? What can you cannot do? Because for me, I love to let my student be hands-on with everything, because that's how I learned as a nursing student. And so I want them to feel comfortable to be able to come in, jump on in, and get their hands into everything and getting to have that practice. And so that's something that I personally enjoy as a preceptor, being able to do that for someone. And so when I have someone following me, I always want to know what they are allowed and can't do. And a lot of times they will tell me that, oh, we are allowed to do all these things except for like inserting IVs, or if we're giving medications, we have to have you there with us. And I'm like, okay, that's totally fine. As long as I know and I'm aware of what their limitations are, then a lot of times I let them do pretty much everything. Of course, I'm going to be there to observe them, guide through them through everything. So it's very important for your nurse to know what your limitations are. So that way, of course, that you don't get in trouble and the nurse doesn't get in trouble by allowing you to do certain things that technically you weren't supposed to do. So it's very important for you to introduce yourself and make sure to mention what your limitations are. The next thing that's important to note is to keep an open mind. So there's probably going to be things that you are able to do and can't do, and just depending on the nurse that you're with, some feel comfortable and some don't. So do not take that to heart, and just always remember that everything is a learning opportunity, whether you're able to observe or actually do something. So please take advantage of every opportunity that you get, even if it's just to observe something that another nurse on the other side of the room is inserting an IV, or they're doing a certain procedure and that you guys aren't really doing something at this moment. Ask your preceptor if it's okay for you to go observe. And a lot of times preceptors are really good at providing those opportunities and grabbing you to go see something another nurse is doing. So sometimes there's just nurses who aren't proactive like that and or very shy about doing that. And so definitely be a person to advocate for yourself and for your own learning experiences, and ask, hey, is it okay if I can go see that, or can I go observe that? And a lot of times the nurse will be totally fine with that, and that way you can still get some exposure and some experience. And some nurses will even pull you over and have you be involved in it somehow. So definitely keep an open mind to all the learning experiences, whether or not you can actually be a part of it, but just being there and having opportunities just to visually observe sometimes too is also great for learning purposes as well. The next super important thing is always asking questions. So I know a lot of people get very scared to ask questions or very hesitant to ask questions because they don't want to come off as dumb or stupid or whatnot, but just remember this, it's always important to ask questions than not, because you don't want to make mistakes. You don't want to end up hurting your patient. That is better that you ask those questions, even if you think they're dumb, because even for me as a preceptor, I'd rather you ask me questions than not ask me anything at all. And you're constantly silent all the time. And to me, that seems as if you're not proactive to me. So sometimes nurses may view it that way, that you're not asking questions because you just have nothing to really ask, or that you don't want to be proactive in your own learning. So we'd actually rather you ask questions than not ask anything at all. And even if they may seem dumb to you, it's actually better that you do ask us. So I personally enjoy it when the person that I'm with is very proactive, asking a lot of questions, because it seems to me that they're very interested in wanting to learn and interested in wanting to grow. And a lot of times too, that it actually, them asking me questions actually makes me remember a lot of things that sometimes I don't come across often, or sometimes if I don't even know, I'll be like, hey, why don't we go look through this together? Because there's also some things that we just don't come across often that I forget or that I've never seen or heard about before. So it's also a learning opportunity for the nurse that you're following as well. So always make sure to ask questions for safety purposes and also just for your own learning. The next thing that is super important too, that I find very important in the person that I'm following, is being organized. And so this can be very challenging for some, because a lot of people are not sure of what to even organize or what they should do to keep themselves organized. But I think what's really important for you during your preceptorship is that you're going to be on this unit for a while. So it's important for either the nurse that you're following, if they have some sort of brain or report sheet that they use often, if you can ask them if they can have theirs or borrow from theirs. But if they don't have one, or the hospital does not provide them one, then try to create a brain sheet that might be helpful for you. And I do have a brain sheet available if you're interested. I'll link it down in the description, that I found very helpful, that I created to go with the flow of how my unit gives report. It helps flow very smoothly when you're giving a report as well, and just to cover over information that you'll need during a report. And this can be used for any unit in the NICU. And so I found that really helpful for me. So this is more of a NICU specific brain sheet that I'll be leaving down in the description. But if you're working in any other unit, it's important to create some sort of brain sheet that works well, flows well, so that way your report isn't all over the place, and it helps to keep something written down. Because I don't know about you, but I forget things all the time, and if I don't have it written down, I'm going to forget. So it's important, especially when you're starting out and as a new person, just to write everything down. Even if it's your vital signs or just things that you're doing in your assessment, write it down on your brain/report sheet. That way you can go back to chart these things, but also it's a good memory for you as well, in case something happens throughout the day and you forgot about it. At least towards the end of the day when you give a report, you're like, oh yeah, this happened too, and making sure to report that to your oncoming shift nurse too. So it's very important in your preceptorship to develop some sort of organizational tool, whether that be your report sheet or just some sheet of paper where you just write things down, is super important. And lastly, the most important thing when you're doing your preceptorship is reflecting on your day. You do not know how many people forget to do this. And it's one of those things where I wish when I was in nursing school that I did something like this, because when you do your interview process, when you start applying for jobs, a lot of them are going to ask for types of examples during your clinical rotations, during your precept or whatnot. So a lot of times people are going to be like, oh, I don't remember those scenarios because they never wrote it down. So it's so important for you to carry like a journal, a notebook, or something like that. And that way you write things down, especially reflecting on your day, if things went well, what things didn't go well, what skills you were able to learn. It's so important to do so, because you're going to be getting asked a lot of interview questions that are asking about clinical examples on when was a time when this happened. And you can actually pull back on actual examples because you were able to reflect on your shift and talk about specific examples about your patient. So it's really important to keep a notebook and try to write things that are super memorable for you, or just specific patients that you actually care for. Of course, don't put their names, but you can talk about patients that you've cared for and write it down in your journal. And that way it's kind of like a reminder for you about the types of patients you've cared for. And it really will benefit you so much when you start doing your interviews, because they will be asking for these types of examples and you have actual concrete examples of when this happened. So it's very important for you to do so. And then one thing that I want to mention, kind of going along with that for NICU nurses specifically, is that skills are super important when you're doing your interview process. So a lot of times what hospitals want to see, especially in the NICU, but this can go for any unit as well, is skills that you've done. So it's important for you to also reflect on the day and what you've gotten to experience, but writing down actual skills. So I liked to have a little checkoff list that I had in the back of my notebook, and I write down skills that I actually physically got to do. And that way, when I did my interviews, when I was applying for NICU jobs, I can actually list out stuff that I actually got to do. So for example, during my preceptorship, I got to like insert an NG, I got to insert an IV, I got to assist with labs or do labs. I got to feed preemie patients. I got to go to a delivery. So I would write this list down in my notebook. So when I did my interview process and even on my resume, I can actually write down specific skills that I did specific to the NICU. So when you're applying for your hospitals, depending on what unit you're working for, always make sure to reflect on your shift and write down specific skills you got to do. So when you do your resume and your interviews, you actually have concrete skills, because they love to look at that. Hospitals love to look and see what types of experience have you gotten and what skills do you even have. And this really will benefit you for those that don't have a preceptorship as well. Being able to just be in a unit where you actually physically got to do things is super important, and it will actually benefit you a lot when you do your interview process, because they get to see that, oh, you have a broad range of skills. Even if it may not be specific to the unit that you want or that you're applying for, at least it helps to give them a general idea of things that you've been able to do in the past, if that makes sense. So hopefully this video is helpful for you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed my content so far. Let me know down in the comments below what other videos you'd like me to make, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.
'Cause anywhere with you feels right.